Hello, I'm Tom from Compress, and today we'll be talking about the Adventurer's Domestic Handbook. This is a Fantasy Grounds add-on for D&D 5e. It is a really thick, well-featured adventure supplement. We'll go over each of the major areas and cover a few examples of what's included. For starters, it comes with a reference manual you can see up here. It also includes a lot of new options for player characters and non-player characters, including backgrounds, classes, feats. There are some new items. The NPCs that you might interact with as family members or employees are included in here, including stat blocks and artwork. And there are a bunch of interesting tables. So without further ado, let's dig in. Starting with romantic relationships, I like that the author put in a little bit of advice on how to work your way around the potentially sticky situation of romance at your table. Can be tricky, and the big thing is consent. There's some very thoughtful advice in this supplement. So take some time to read that, talk with your players ahead of time, and hopefully this advice will help you keep your table running smoothly. In addition to the advice on romance and seduction, you can also take a look at the marriage section. There is a really in-depth appendix here that talks about all of the different ceremonies that you could possibly have. They are inspired by the types of people that you might find around a homestead. Moving on to family relationships, there's some really decent advice here on how you might roleplay and support characters who want to have their family come with them. They might want to train their family, they might want to have children, they might want to have pregnancies, and there's a really interesting item called the Magic Coin Purse. I'll leave that for you to discover if you purchase the module. If you get into having children, there are some interesting features for pregnancy, giving birth, child rearing. This is clearly written by somebody who is probably also a parent. So those of you out there that have kids, you may find this entertaining. If your players want to own a business, there's an incredible amount of detail here, starting with where they might want to run their business. There are all kinds of different settings, different tables for whether or not they want to run their business in a city, in a village, in smaller towns, and it talks about the different areas of the city, whether they're poor, modest, comfortable, wealthy, or aristocratic. It talks about how much it costs to rent, how many customers they might get per day, how much profit they might make per day, and even goes into upkeep. So it has some tables that talk about the chance of losing sales if you're not doing your upkeep and keeping your store in good shape. Lastly, at the very bottom of the upkeep, I believe there's even some information about signage. So if you have a very nice sign or a modest sign, that might bring an increased amount of business. Lastly, there's information about joining a guild for DMs to consider, or even starting a guild. This is a big one. Buying land and establishing a home is potentially a very large part of what your campaign could be. As a DM, you could end up spending a lot of time trying to manage this on your own, but this module has a wealth of information and a good number of tables at your disposal to help you out with it. So you can start looking at whether or not your characters can influence the price of their purchase. It takes a look at whether or not they maintain their property and whether or not squatters move in. If the land is just a bare plot, they have to prepare it, cultivate it, get it ready, and staff it. Once you're ready, you can actually start building on the land. So there's cost available, there's time required, and the types of workers required to make a building. Once the building's ready, there are upgrade costs. There's atmosphere, and the fun thing about atmosphere is that if your players decide to build a specific room that has, let's say, the calmed mind, they'll have advantage on their perception rolls for the next 8 hours, which is a nice benefit to having your own home. Once you get to the point of having to staff your building, this module includes NPCs like a cook who comes fully statted out with a nice stat block for you, including a melee weapon attack, with bludgeoning damage. 1d4 sounds like it might be a rolling pin. If you want to add a cast iron skillet, maybe that'd be a d8, but probably also bludgeoning. Lastly, you can either become the landlord, rent out your new homestead, or be a renter. If you choose to become the landlord, and you find you're too busy and you don't have anyone there to help you out, there's a landlord stat block. So you can look at the landlord here, and then here's a nice image of renter's rights that you could hand out to your players so they'll know what's expected of them. Once you get to the point of characters wanting to take advantage of some of the other stuff in this module, they might want to customize their own player character and perhaps re-roll some of their backgrounds or feats. And there are actual new class subtypes in this module. I'm not going to cover them all, but I thought I'd pick out Barbarian with the Path of the Protector, the Fighter, the Chivalrous Knight, and the Warlock Mother Patron. These are fully fleshed out subclasses with an entire class sheet that shows up that you can drag and drop to your own player characters. And they have all of the features already laid out. So if you go to, I don't know, any means, you'll see here that the Barbarian has features already built into it. Same for Fighter, same for Warlock, same for every one of these classes. For further customization, there's some new backgrounds and feats for your players. There's the Farmer background and the Ferocious Protector, each with their fully fleshed out backgrounds for your players to enjoy. And lastly, the NPCs that I briefly mentioned before. There are both romanceable NPCs and employees. The romanceable NPCs are really full featured. There's a story involved, there's a full stat block, and an image for each one of them. When you get to the NPC Other tab, this link will open the story, so you have a fully linked, fully referenced, fully fleshed out character, complete with ideals, bonds, flaws, and personality. Again, there's really decent representation in here. You can see all kinds of different variety, all kinds of different races and personalities. Last two appendices I wanted to cover were magic items and the full listing of the stat blocks. This is where you round out the final pieces of your module, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks.